Capitalism is a process of extraction. It is a process of sorting out who are the extractable classes, who are the exploited classes. And part of how you do that is through race. It's through racialization, because racialization justifies caste, and caste justifies extraction. It justifies exploitation. You can learn this in India, right? You can learn this in the case of Indian history. Why is there a class of untouchables? Because somebody has to pick up the poop, because somebody has to be the janitor. And we have to have a system through which we can continuously justify who has the worst jobs and who gets paid the least to do the stuff that nobody else wants to do.
Well, now, how many times people go, well, if we got rid of these illegal immigrants, then they won't be, then who's going to do these jobs? Nobody wants to do these jobs. Right? That's part of the reason why they never actually got rid of us. They actually it was cheaper to make us into sharecroppers and to actually do these jobs that some people just didn't want to do. Or it was cheaper because these landowners were able to just pay us less than they did the white field hands. 400 years we've been telling y'all the same damn thing for 400 years, and some of y'all ain't listen. What did we say? Black folks have been the canaries in the coal mines. Between us and Native Americans, Black folks, we looking at Native Americans like, do these people listen to us? And the Native Americans like, they haven't listened to us, and they ain't listening to y'all, so we're cooked. We're just cooked. You got to listen to the people who've been through it initially in order to know where you're going, in order to know where to go. And so Elliot Sang did this impromptu video. And I'm going to be real with you. I'm glad somebody gets it, right? Look, who am I? I am a Black freedman communist, right? The same stripes as a Fred Hampton, as a Assata Shakur. I am of the same stripes as people like them, right? And the point is that a lot of us, especially my ancestors in the Black radical tradition, we have been saying these things in regards to how America operates for centuries, really. And this isn't going to be a lambasting. This isn't going to be a very extremely harsh criticism, a patronizing of particularly white people. This is not what it's going to be. But this is going to be more of now that you are listening to us, this is what we've been saying all along. And we've been saying it, but we haven't been listened to. So maybe somebody who has more proximity to whiteness, maybe you'll listen to them. Let's get into this because I'm hungry. He's been cooking. Let's go. His video is entitled, "Black People Have Been Telling Us About America. We Never Listen." Elliot Sang, let's get into it.
About it. But if we're going to talk about it, let's really talk about it. Black folks have been warning us for a long time. And people not only haven't listened, but even with what's going on, people still don't want to listen. And I think this is a conversation that goes a lot deeper than even just the context of political discourse that surrounds us in America. This is a global phenomenon. But I want to start right here in the homeland, right here in the imperial core, because for one, I think Renee Good would want this to be talked about. I think the folks that have been suffering the brunt of state violence, which we are now becoming more and more unruly against. Those folks would want this to be talked about the real way. Before I get into it, I just want to say I'm on break right now, so this is not the most organized type of conversation that I've, had. Just giving some thoughts while I am currently away from home. And I'm doing so off the cuff and in reaction to recent news. I don't think I need to remind you of that recent news. Of course, American imperialism in Latin America and Africa comes to mind. In Asia comes to mind. Of course, European imperialism comes to mind. Shout out to Norway. Norway gets away with a lot. It's also, of course, a reaction to the, American Gestapo, the ICE shootings, multiple, plural shootings and killings that have occurred, not just the videotaped incident in Minnesota, but in several incidences over the past years, with special attention being brought toward it right now. And of course, I want to say that I'm glad that more and more people are becoming aware, getting more politically engaged, getting more outraged. But outrage can only do so much. If your outrage is reduced to anger that you take out online and catchphrases that you sling around and one or two little protest walks, that outrage is more so in service of your own ego than it is in service of the wider community that we're trying to help.
Oh, snap. Oh, man. All right. Y'all ready? Because now he's talking about action. He's not talking about just words. He's not just talking about going out into the streets and waving a sign around, basically the modern day version of "we shall overcome." No. See, this is the part that we really need to hear. Because when people like us on the left, who are actually out in these streets doing the work, when we're telling you that action needs to be involved, we're not talking about going to your local polling place to bubble a few names in and say, see, I did my job, now I can go to brunch. We're not talking about that. And we're not just talking about, oh, well, every couple of months or maybe a couple times a year or so, I go down during the holidays to volunteer at my local soup kitchen or food pantry to help them out. We're not talking about that either. No. We're talking about real mutual aid, the real deal Holyfield. We're talking about the stuff that the Black Panther Party actually did. That's what we're talking about. The problem is some people are either too comfortable or they're scared to actually do the things to fight the system, because they'll be outraged for a minute. For a minute, they'll be outraged. Then after that minute of being outraged, then they go back on sleep. You can't sleep this off, baby. Because by the time you wake back up again, it'll be in your face like this. And then you can be scared. So let's go. By the way, sign up for Savvy's mutual aid workshop, Saturday the 24th. Go ahead, sign up for it. I'll be there.
And this is something that we've all had to kind of learn, isn't it? It's a recurring story. We've had decades and decades of protest movements that have borne this thesis out. All that said, one of the phrases that we're seeing all over the place in response to the shooting of Renee Good is, that could have been any one of us. And yeah, not wrong, especially harrowing, when it's the murder of a U.S. citizen, a law-abiding U.S. citizen, despite what the party wants you to believe about her conduct. But it also could have been us when it was Philando Castile.
The system continues to fail Black people, and they will continue to fail you all. Like I said, because this happened with Philando, when they get done with us, they're coming from you, for you, and all your interracial children. Yeah.
Oh, Mama done prophesied. She done said, hey, wait, hold up. What have we been saying for a long time? For those who are Black and on the left, we said if they did it to us, they're going to come and do it to you. And some of you, it hasn't actually became manifest in your brains. The synapses have not connected yet. And so now that you get struck in the head with that billy club, now you finally get it, don't you? We've been telling you that if they did it to us, you're next. But a Black woman said it. Falls on deaf ears. But now that it's happening, now it's like, oh my God, I finally get it. And that's the sad part about the United States. One of the sad parts about the United States is people typically do not learn empathy until it actually happens to them. They don't learn that they should care about something until they are the victims. I'm trying to prevent more victims, and you just keep falling for it. And so, really, it's not like we're saying this, for kicks. We're not. We want our suffering to stop, but we also don't want you guys to suffer either. We want it all to stop. That's the point. But some of y'all keep falling for the okie doke. You know what I mean? So I don't know what to tell you. Shall we continue? Yes, we shall.
Y'all are next, and you'll be standing up here fighting for justice just as well as I am. I am so disappointed in the state of Minnesota. My son loved this state.
It could have been us when it was the wide variety of victims of state-sanctioned violence. Black men and women, Black trans folks, Black queer folks, who have consistently been martyred only for no large social media movement, no large political organizing rally to be conducted in response, at least one that, let's say, breaks color lines.
Last week, a man named Keith Porter was killed by an off-duty ICE agent, but you probably haven't heard his name. And while part of that may be because of the ICE agent being off-duty rather than on-duty with a large crowd, we also know the biggest reason why this exists. Keith Porter is a Black man, and Black men, Black women that get killed by agents, officers, don't get the same amount of national attention. Many people online have been very angry at me and other Black people for saying not to use the phrase "say her name" when it comes to Renee Good. And this is part of the reason. It is taken.
Now, I know some people are going to get upset, but the whole say her name thing, it's a Black culture thing where it's happened because of Black women being victims. The people who are the most marginalized when it comes to being on that hierarchical ladder, right? They're some of the lowest on that hierarchical ladder. And so for the use of say her name was made to amplify the people who are the most disenfranchised in our community. And it's similar to the phrase rest in power, which is exclusively applied to Black people. So I'm saying in a kind way, those phrases are reserved for Black people who have been victimized by this system or who have been fighting against the systemic oppression, who have passed. So say her name and rest in power is really reserved for those people. And so I understand the sentiment behind people who want to use it for white folks. I understand that. But as a people who have been oppressed as much as we have, and as much as our culture has been appropriated and no credit has been given because of that appropriation, Black folks now have a sense now to gatekeep certain things for a preservation of culture. And so that's why some Black folks may look at you with a side eye if you say her name for a white woman, or if you say rest in power to somebody that is non-Black. You know what I mean? So we'll try to have that cultural literacy when it comes to the Black community, because I think that's what's necessary. That cultural literacy is really learned by examining our tradition and our history and why we say and do the things that we do. So I just wanted to put that out there. So thank you very much for that. And also, I need to do some house cleaning on whoever this is. Hang on. Boom. There we go. All right. Had a troll in the chat, in the Rumble chat, not the regular chat. All right. So they might come back though, but if they do, then it might increase my views on the algorithm though. So it is what it is. Whatever. All right. Let's continue on.
At me and other Black people for saying not to use the phrase say her name when it comes to Renee Good. And this is part of the reason. It has taken 7 days for the average person, and not even the average person, but for people online to find out about Keith Porter, while most people across the country know who Renee Good is within 24 hours. Within 24 hours, people have started marching for her. They have been sharing the stories of her families. They have been talking about her, sharing posts of her, memorializing her, making sure that she is known. Meanwhile, Keith Porter's family, they've been struggling to get into the news cycle. They've been struggling to have any conversation. And the same defense that ICE agents are using to justify killing Good is the same defense that they're using for justifying killing Porter. They say that he had a weapon and that he pointed it at them first, despite the fact that nobody on the scene concurred that, aside from the officer who shot him.
This is also why I question DHS, because how many people who were on the scene that said, oh yeah, he was pointing his gun at everybody, he was pointing his gun at people, and he was putting us all in danger. How many people are actually saying that on the ground? The only person that was dangerous that was there was that off-duty ICE officer. Keith Porter wasn't actually a danger to the people that were living there. Once again, in the United States of America, the most dangerous person is a person with a badge and a gun, because they are given license to be judge, jury, and executioner.
These are the conversations that we need to be having. It's not divisive to ask you to use language that matters. It's not offensive to ask you to consider how you're speaking about an issue, because part of the reason why fascism is happening now in the United States is because certain groups of people have never had to care this much.
How did we let it get so bad? Do you know who could have warned you? Kwame Jones, William Howard Green, Jackeen O'Neal Light, Leonard Parker Jr., Carl Grant, Reginald Payne, Manuel Ellis, Barry Geddes, Donnie Sanders, Breonna Taylor.
These are lived realities for Black folks in the United States. And we often take that almost like it's supposed to happen. It informs us a little bit. It motivates us, especially when we feel particularly aggrieved with the United States, particularly mad at our elected officials, particularly mad at our rich capitalist classes. And then we put it aside and we continue on with our lives because our lives, in our minds, are something separate from the lives of Black folks, from the lives of poor and working class Black folks, from the lives of Black martyrs. Our political reality is something separate from the Black Panthers. It's something separate from Black organizing work. It's something separate from anti-imperial organizing work. That's just stuff that we get into when we're in the mood. But as far as our lived reality, our everyday experiences, our relationship with our police forces, our relationships to money, our relationships to culture, as non-Black people, all of us view Black histories, Black cultural work, Black activism as separate, as something that's not connected to our own experience, as something novel that we can reach into like a bag of candy, pull out a little Twizzler every now and then, and use it to sugarcoat what we do. This is the kind.
So, and why is this? Here's for some tough talk. Because some of you do not see yourselves in Black Americans. You don't see us on equal footing. You don't see our lives worth the same amount as yours. If you did, then you would have more outrage. Unfortunately, you don't. Some of you have been brainwashed into compromising your humanity based on the amount of melanin somebody has in their skin. And some of you do it subconsciously. Some of you aren't necessarily thinking that directly in the front of your minds. But this is where decolonizing your mind is necessary. Because if you don't, are you that much better than some of these white supremacists that actively do the same things? The only difference is you do it more subconsciously rather than consciously. And so this is why this work that we have to do, this internal work of real liberation. Liberation actually starts in the mind and heart. You have to divorce yourself from this white supremacist mindset and thinking that is deeply ingrained into us, including us Black Americans, because it's also ingrained in us too. I'm not just talking to white people. I'm not just talking to non-Black people who are brown. I'm talking to my other fellow Black people too. Some of y'all got internalized white supremacy and you need to pluck it out. And stop looking at the straw in your freedman brother and sister's eye and look at the rafter in your own. Yes, we're going to church today. We're not going to be looking at other people and not examining ourselves. We Black Americans also have to clean our own house as well too. But at the same time, two things can be true at the same time, that we have been speaking about this forever. And we will continue to, but do not allow yourself to be brainwashed into leaving the Black radical tradition that was set before you by our ancestors. And also to people who are non-Black. It is time for you to start listening to our ancestors and us that are living in this experience now. Because the people who have been going through it, you have two groups that have been going through this entire time. They are Native Americans and Black Americans. And we have been going through this for this entire time. Are you listening? Don't just hear what we say. I want your brain to be a substation to your heart. I want it to go into your ears, come to your brain, do a little process, and it'll go straight to your heart. Don't you dare let it go out the other side of your ears. Don't you let it escape. If you let it escape, that means you're not as good of a person as you think you are.
Kind of thing that you see borne out over and over again. And, there's been multiple TikToks that I will showcase in this video that really speak to this point. This is borne out when you see the wording, the verbiage, the responses, the thought processes that so many people have, and it's not just Americans, we are going to get into it, have in the response to political outrage. Here's one example, and one particular TikTok I'll show you gets into it. It's always Nazi Germany,
Even if we fix this right now, America gonna be right back in this situation in like 2 generations, because white people is not learning a lesson that they need to learn. Because here's the thing, you may not have started the original curse, but you, your mother, your grandmother, your great grandmother, y'all have been feeding the curse generation after generation after generation. And this is the thing that's blowing my mind. Y'all keep saying Germany. Y'all keep pulling up pictures of German soldiers. Pull up them pictures of your grandparents outside them schools. Pull up the pictures of your great-grandparents at them picnics. Stop talking about Germany when they learned they playbook from a real specific group of motherfuckers who 2 generations, they kids is looking at me on this goddamn app right now. Y'all.
Oh, why don't they want us to learn about critical race theory? Why are they so okay with us worrying about the Holocaust, but they shy away from critical race theory? Because the Holocaust means that you're focusing on people who don't have that ancestry, who did these horrible things to Jewish people. And they don't have to have a mirror shown up to their face to go, hey, look, this right here is what your ancestors did to us. They don't want to face that because they're cowards. You want to know another gruesome truth as well? Anytime you see a light-skinned Black person, I don't care if it's a Beyonce, I don't care if it's Angela Davis, I don't care. Like, think about a light-skinned Black person that you know, right? We all, including myself, because I took a DNA test. Most of us have some type of European ancestry, meaning some of those slaveholders are also our ancestors too. And yet we have to contend with knowing what they did to our other ancestors. And so we have to decolonize our minds and also weed out the internalized white supremacy. So we can do it while knowing what they did to our ancestors and them being some of our ancestors. That means you can do it too. You can do it too. History ain't pretty, but it is necessary to know. Those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. Oh, she cooking too.
2 generations, they kids is looking at me on this goddamn app right now. y'all are related to, in the same house as, and breaking bread with the motherfuckers that created this world that we live in today. And we warned you, and we warned you, and we warned you, and you warned you.
White people are always ready to compare the Trump administration to Nazi Germany, ICE as Gestapo, Trump as Hitler, etc. It's never white supremacist movements of the 50s and 60s. It's never the Ku Klux Klan. It's never what happened to the Black Panthers. It's never COINTELPRO. It's never Operation Condor. It's never the violence of neoliberalism. It's never the crack epidemic. It's never our various ventures into the Middle East. Those people, the things that they suffered from, the CIA assassination or the FBI assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., those are kind of curiosities. Those are interesting footnotes in a complicated and sometimes quite dark history of the world we live in today. Those are always peripheral. That's why it's the periphery. That's why Black Americans are a colonized people. This is something that I think a lot of people are not quite coming to grips with, and we will see that discourse play out over the next couple of years. We will see the use of the term internal colonies become popular, but not right now, because white people have this tendency every time they get back into their outrage bag, every time they get back into their political commentary bag, every time new progressive movements form, thankfully, new social justice movements form, thankfully, and white people find themselves with platforms at the forefront of it, they're always in their minds inventing fire. They're always in their minds stumbling upon brand new ideas that they just have to share with everybody. So now that they've just figured out that imperialism is a thing, now that they've just figured out the core periphery distinction a little bit, they've figured out that what we have in this country is built off of what we do to other countries, what we do to a global proletariat, a global exploited class. Now they want to tell everybody about it. They can't wait to tell you. Did you know what we do in the Congo? Yes. Yes. Did you know in Palestine? Yes. Right. And this is not me speaking from an arrogant standpoint, or I'm attempting not to be arrogant about it, because there's a lot that I'm still learning. And sometimes I'm guilty of this too. But, what happens in the process is then inevitably Black folks will chime in and white people will speak over them all over again, as if these Black folks are not speaking from the histories and experiences and the knowledges that have been built off of studying this very dynamic for centuries, which you are just now getting more active in your resistance towards. Case in point, there are these constant arguments about Black Americans this. Every time something happens to a non-Black person that bothers them, the first thing they think about is how much they hate Black people. It's really telling because, I see a post on Tumblr about Pride Month, and it's this, young person clearly from like New Zealand who's angry about American exceptionalism and American imperialism and how it's distorted queer histories in New Zealand and Maori histories. And who's the subject of their ire? It's not white gay folks. It's not the bourgeois queer classes in the United States that are predominantly white. It's not white supremacy. They're mad at Black trans women. Oh, Marsha P. Johnson has nothing to do with queer histories in New Zealand, right?
Just because you're LGBTQ doesn't exempt you from this conversation. Okay? White gays, white lesbians, white bi people, white dolls, butchers and femmes, y'all need to sit down for this conversation too. Yep. All y'all too. Y'all need to sit down for this conversation too, because guess what? I'm going to tell you right now, right? Something that's going to blow your mind. Some of those people, some of those enslavers were LGBTQ people too. Oh, some of y'all brain just broke right now. Some of y'all like, what? No way. Yep. They weren't just sexually assaulting female slaves. Y'all, they weren't just sexually assaulting them. Yep. You don't think they weren't doing anything with the male slaves either? And also, it wasn't just the male slaveholders, it was the female slaveholders that were also doing things too. Yes. That's a whole nother conversation we can get into. Also, by the way, we didn't learn homosexuality and LGBTQ and all these things from Europeans and white people. It's always existed. So therefore, something that some black folks may not be ready for it, but some of our ancestors are LGBTQ people too. And some of us were forced into heterosexual relationships because they wanted us to breed in order to be able to create more slaves. Oh, that's a whole nother conversation too. But the point is that, yeah, white supremacy can exist in white LGBTQ spaces as well. Your sexuality does not absolve you from white supremacy. Let's go.
What the hell do black trans women have to do with this? Why is the subject of your eye are black folks, right? But they do this every time. They figure out something about how the world works, and they cannot wait to say, black people have not told me about this. Black people actually don't realize this. Black people think they're the only oppressed people. Black people have a perpetual victimhood mentality. Even some of the most self-proclaimed far left people will fall into the same rhetoric time and time again. And it's tiring. It's tiring because they, within a couple of years, as I mentioned, we're going to be like, oh, did you know that the United States has internal colonies? You don't say. You don't say.
That was his version of bruh. Yup. Internal colonies, yeah. And when those internal colonies aren't doing exactly what the white supremacist system wants us to do, which is basically turn over and die, what do? Well, if we start to succeed, well, look at what happened in Rosewood. Look what happened in Ocoee. Look what happened in Seneca Village in New York. Look what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It just happens over and over and over again. We're constantly terrorized. We're constantly colonized. We are colonized in the imperial core. It's wild to me. And how many people are learning about, for instance, how many black towns that are literally, you go to a lake and you discover that lake that you swam in, especially as a child, there were literally houses that black people used to live in underwater there that they actually buried underwater. And if you were to dive deep enough, you would actually be able to see some people's houses. Because that's exactly what they did. This is why I say, go watch Dr. Joy DeGrew's post-traumatic slave syndrome lecture. Because for them, picnics were a happy time where people like my ancestors were lynched. And they took body parts as souvenirs. Yes, that is American history. It's not comfortable, but it's true. Let's continue on. I told you he was cooking. He was cooking. Let's keep going.
As I mentioned, we're going to be like, oh, did you know that the United States has internal colonies? You don't say. You don't say that some of the places that we would consider colonies are technically within the borders of the United States, technically part of U.S. states. It's a conversation that somehow was skirted about Hawaii. It's a conversation we're going to be having about Puerto Rico as Bad Bunny performs for the Super Bowl soon. But folks still do not acknowledge that there are Black Americans in predominantly Black as well as brown neighborhoods, inner cities throughout the United States that still don't have clean drinking water, that don't have clean air to breathe, that have completely broken down housing situations, that live materially in conditions that are quite similar to many within the Global South. And that likewise, there are many people living quite nicely in the Global South, which is not to say that the extraction dynamic and the imperialism dynamics don't extend outside of the United States and don't often take place, or most of the time take place outside of US borders, but borders don't got nothing to do with it. Capitalism is a process of extraction. It is a process of sorting out who are the extractable classes, who are the exploited classes. And part of how you do that is through race. It's through racialization, because racialization justifies caste, and caste justifies extraction. It justifies exploitation. You can learn this in India, right? You can learn this in the case of Indian history. Why is there a class of untouchables? Because somebody has to pick up the poop, because somebody has to be the janitor. And we have to have a system through which we can continuously justify who has the worst jobs and who gets paid the least to do the stuff that nobody else wants to do.
Well, now, how many times people go, well, if we got rid of these illegal immigrants, then they won't be, then who's going to do these jobs? Nobody wants to do these jobs. Right? That's part of the reason why they never actually got rid of us. They actually... It was cheaper to make us into sharecroppers and to actually do these jobs that some people just didn't want to do. Or it was cheaper because these landowners were able to just pay us less than they did the white field hands. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is. Our ancestors were cheaper than white field hands. Before there was cowboys, they were called cow hands if they were white. They were called cowboys because they were black. And so now, guess what? It shifted. Now it's the illegals that are now given those jobs because guess what? They now have another underclass that does these jobs. History may not repeat itself, but it damn sure rhymes.
All of this is to say that Black folks have been telling us this for a long time. Black folks have been telling us about state-sanctioned violence for a long time. Black folks have been talking about police abolition for a very long time. And it has become this red flag discourse, this something that triggers white folks, right? Abolish the police, abolish the police. But now that you have something attached to the Trump administration and branding, empowered by the Trump administration, and something that actively and aesthetically and remorselessly targets US citizens who are sometimes white, all of a sudden it's abolish ICE. All of a sudden abolition is a popular concept because when it affects white people, they go from going like this to going like this. Does that make sense? And
absolutely, it makes perfect sense. Because we were saying abolish the police and defund the police years ago. What? It's been, 10 years? And then people go, oh my God, no, you guys don't want to do that. Also, by the way, all these people that woke up to this because Trump is doing it didn't have much to say when Obama and Biden were doing it. And guess what? When 2028 comes, if you guys suddenly decide that you guys want to put in another Democrat, guess what's going to happen? Y'all going to go back to sleep. You're going to go back to sleep until another one that looks like me is massacred again. And then you'll want to march again. And then you're going to want to use hashtags again. And then you're going to be using rest in power again. Instead of actually changing the system fundamentally. But because it's your favorite politician, it's like, no, we can't do that. Remember the graph I showed of Democrats and Republicans both increasing ICE funding? Just because somebody has a D next to their name, they're no better than a Republican. And vice versa. It's the same thing with Republican. Just because they have an R next to their name does not make them suddenly better than a Democrat. Because, like I said, fascism is bipartisan. Let's continue on. The Caucasian is still happenation. Let's go.
This is not something that is exclusive to just white people. This is a reality among non-Black people globally, especially white people globally. There are many of us who are diligent in trying to learn from Black Americans as well as other marginalized groups throughout the world. But there are many, many more of us, it seems, who are almost resolute in maintaining a dominant position socially over Black people. One of the things you hear also about Americans is, oh, when are Americans going to revolt? I love this one. I want to sip some water before I talk about this one. Why don't Americans do what they're doing in Paris, what they've done in Paris? Why aren't they doing what's happening in Nepal? Oh, it's because Americans are so silly. They're so stupid. They're so uneducated. They're so selfish. Meanwhile, police precincts were getting burned in 2020. Resistance actions have been happening throughout the United States every single year. And it's Black and it's brown folks that are often leading the charge. Right in this moment, you can...
Wait. Now, people were saying, and especially when France was in the streets and they were protesting their government, oh my God, French people, they're about that life. Meanwhile, when we were doing the same thing, they were like, oh my God, you guys shouldn't be doing that because it's looting and it's burning down businesses and buildings and blah, blah, blah. Even some people who consider themselves to be on the left were like, well, we shouldn't do it that way. And yet you're praising the French for doing it. But then when we do it here, oh my God, we gotta do that. And here's the thing. I'm not for wanton violence. I'm not advocating for that. But what I'm saying is that you guys are praising direct action of the French, but yet when Americans choose to do real direct action, you guys don't want to support it. Y'all don't want to get behind something that could be productive, or we were doing something productive before all that even happened, and then we hit the last straw, and then we said stop ghetto time, and then y'all just go, oh my God, stop being that way, when it's like, well, wait, where were you when we were doing the building before all this happened? Where were you when we were feeding people in the streets, when we were clothing people in the streets, doing all these different things? Where were y'all? And then it gets to this, and so then we basically are enough is enough, and then once we start doing actions that represent that enough is enough, then it's like, wait, stop. No. You should have told us, you should have been there with us before that happened. Didn't do it. Same thing with the Black Panther Party. Like, how many Black people were joining in? They didn't have to become members of the party, but it could have been helping even more when they were actually doing their actions. How many people joined in with Dr. King? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. died with a 75% disapproval rating. 75%. Most of America didn't like him before he died. They only started to like him after he died. How many people were there with Malcolm X? How many people were trying to ride with people like Kwame Ture? How many people were actually rooting for Assata Shakur when she fled to Cuba? So why are we praising Europeans for doing something that we've been doing? But it's like, it's cool when Europeans do it, but when we do it, it's bad. It's inconsistent. And it's deep in some white supremacy. Let's be real.
Look up Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi, which is led by Black folks, primarily economic solidarity programs, a solidarity network, a political network aimed at improving the material conditions for Black and brown folks in Jackson, Mississippi. You can look this up right now and figure this out, right? You can learn about Chris Smalls right now, Amazon labor organizer, went to Palestine, was tortured by the IDF. You can learn about this, right? It's right there for you. But rather than look at that and say, some Americans are resisting and some aren't, and why is that? We would rather pretend that America is this united bloc where everybody benefits the same, or at least benefits close enough, And the marginalized groups in the United States are just these selfish, perpetually victimized bourgeois classes that don't care about the rest of the world. And who said that? Because at the same time, y'all are the type of people to cite Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and James Baldwin as your heroes, people who were stringent in talking about solidarity with the third world, anti-Vietnam War, pro-communist, pro-Palestine. Black folks have been on those waves literally for decades. And in the 2020s and 2023, frankly, white folks found out about Palestine, read a couple of articles, and were like, these damn Black people have been lying to me because Palestinians are the real victims. How did you get there? How did you skip so much and get there? It's infuriating and it's frustrating because it's not just a dynamic that plays out in the United States. That kind of rhetoric is just another version of American exceptionalism.
Oh, baby. Because how many people missed a photo of Huey P. Newton in Palestine with Palestinians talking about Palestinian liberation in the 60s, in the 70s? Did y'all miss the picture of Malcolm X with his homeboy Fidel Castro? Did y'all miss that? Oh my God. Well, we didn't hear about this. Well, maybe if you paid attention, maybe if you open your eyes, then you'll probably know that we have actually been talking about this. We've been on this the entire time. But instead, y'all want to believe the stalwarts of white supremacy that basically paint us as violent and lazy and you know, that we steal and all these other horrible, you know, stereotypes that they attribute to us. Instead of actually joining with us and going, hey, I didn't know you guys did all this. Like there's a lot of white people that are just finding out that rock and roll originated by Black people. There's a lot of white people that are just finding out that country music is from Africa. The banjo was literally originally an African instrument. Like some people are just now finding this out. You know what else was created by Black people? Ice cream. And here's a little tidbit fact you know. Did you know that Black people weren't allowed to have vanilla ice cream because vanilla beans actually came from Madagascar and it was too expensive. So therefore they did not allow Black people to have vanilla ice cream. So Black people actually had to invent a different flavor ice cream for themselves. This is where buttered pecan comes from. You know, a real good tasting butter pecan? Yeah, that was a Black invention. Mm-hmm. Also, macaroni and cheese is a Black invention. Thanks, Kraft. It's stuff like that. Barbecue is a Black invention. Because they used to give us the scraps of meat that they didn't want. And we have to make sure that it was really, really done, because not only will be scraps of meat, but it also may be close to almost close to rotting. So in order to be able to make it edible and so that it's safe to eat, we had to cook it low and slow. So many things. Anyway, let's continue.
The idea that America is just so unique in its idiocy, so unique in its backwardsness, culturally, so unique in its selfishness. You know, you hear European folks lecture Americans about whether it's the protesting thing, as they ignore what Black Americans have constantly been doing, or whether it's about capitalism, as if Europe is not dominated by a capitalist class anchored by the EU, which primarily benefits from the profit of extraction from the third world, just like the US, in coordination with the US. European folks will lecture Americans about racism in American society. They're like, I can't get my head around how a country could be so racist. Like literally everything in America is because of racism. As a European, I can't believe this. Are you serious? Really? You might want to think a little bit harder. These ideas of
Also, while we're at it, these same Europeans will be like, well, you guys just need to have a European social democracy like us, because if you guys have a European social democracy like us, then you can actually have a better course of life. Meanwhile, you're stealing from the global south in order to be able to do it. Let me let him finish.
Nation states and borders have clouded your mind, because in France, y'all's whole economy is anchored on West Africa and France Afrique. Oh, you don't think we know about France Afrique? You don't think we've heard about Burkina Faso? You don't think we know about South Africa? You don't think we know about Kenya, Uganda? Europeans have been benefiting from colonial extraction for so long, and they've only done it in a sense where those extraction patterns happen more outside of the borders of the country. And European countries are the size of American states, sometimes American cities. And so it's essentially like you have these floating states full of white people whose economies, again, are founded on extraction from the third world. And then they have the nerve to be like, but we don't do systemic racism. We have like good labor protections. Europeans have good labor protections. Europeans work less hours in a day. Europeans take siestas. It's like, yeah, because your economy is anchored on industries that are either American or that are, you know, in the third world. Like that's how y'all figured it out. Same way the United States figured it out. The United States.
So look, I don't mean to call people out, but the social Democrats and the Democratic Socialists, y'all that will be pointing to, oh, Scandinavian style socialism, or we need social democracies like they have in Europe. Guess what? That's the reality of your European social democracy, that you literally have to extract the resources from the global south in order to be able to have this prosperity that you have, which really is theft. Don't ask the Nigerians, don't ask them about electricity, about how most of, or a huge chunk of their uranium that they have is given to France. Don't ask the people of Mali, who they have a lot of gold mines, but no gold reserves, yet France has a lot of gold reserves, but no gold mines. Why is that? That whole social democracy thing kind of falls apart when you take away the exploitation from the global south.
States is a settler colonial project, which is European in origin. White Americans are European, but anti-blackness, oh, that's not relevant. But what black people say, oh, that has nothing to do with Europe. Oh, black people are so sensitive. They're such victims. They're perpetual victims. Okay. Hannah Arendt, everybody's favorite left-leaning thinker, with all the quotes that are near and dear to Western progressivists' hearts. Hannah Arendt had a lot of smoke for Frantz Fanon. Hannah Arendt did not understand Frantz Fanon. Hannah Arendt said Frantz Fanon was justifying violence, because he wrote that violence is a key part of how the colonized gains its own sovereignty. Hannah Arendt said 2 wrongs don't make a right. Hannah Arendt downplayed the realities of violence in the colonies because she didn't want to look at what a Martinican French psychologist and philosopher had to say about the realities of violence faced by colonized people every single day. And to this day, even European progressives maintain this kind of hostility towards Black decolonial thought. Aimé Césaire told y'all about yourselves a long time ago on the subject of Nazi Germany. Aimé Césaire wrote that the European was aghast at what happened through the Nazis because it was the same type of violence and dehumanization and imperialism targeted towards other Europeans. And there were constant cries of this is not who we are, and this is not the kind of conduct that is acceptable in Europe.
Wait, how many people have said when a mass shooting happens here in the United States, oh my God, that's not who we are? And the mass shooter typically is what race again? Just asking a question.
I mean, it was for the centuries in which you accumulated all of this exploited wealth from the third world. Then the violence was fine for Europeans. What the Belgians did in Congo was totally fine. But once the Germans did what they did, now all of a sudden we got to talk about barbarism and violence and fascism. White people always find a way. Non-Black people always find a way. Whether it's in South Korea, a country hell-bent on exploiting Black American culture whilst looking down continuously on people on behalf of their skin color, upholding European beauty standards and European standards of thought, European capitalist standards, American capitalist standards, aspiring through its elites to that kind of white supremacy. Same like in Japan or in Latin America. Something I've talked about very recently, something very near and dear to my heart. Black people have been telling you about Latin America. Not just Black Americans. Afro-Latinos have led charges to deconstruct Latinidad, have led charges to talk about why white supremacy is dominant in Latin America, why the elites of Latin America remain either the descendants of or new versions of the European settler classes that created Latin America in the first place. And all this talk about salsa and empanadas and comida criolla, all this stuff is just whitewashed versions of African and indigenous lived realities to be branded as Latino, branded as something.
Ooh. I told you he was cooking, wasn't I? Yep. He's cooking.
Something new, branded as something better than backwards Africans. The role that Haiti played historically in liberating Latin America. I mean, there is nowhere near the same level of success for Simon Bolivar without the contributions of Haitians and without what the Haitians did in Haiti. Only for Simon Bolivar, who was an avowed abolitionist, to not free the slaves. Over and over again, Black folks are there, right there. The uprisings, the slave revolts, the Haitian Revolution, the Black Marxism in the 20th century, Walter Rodney, Frantz Fanon, W.E.B. Du Bois, though he has some ableism that we don't talk about in his work, the James Baldwins. And even now, folks don't want to read Olufemi Taiwo. Folks don't want to read Angela Davis. Folks still want to figure it out without learning from the people that experienced the brunt, the harshest end of this capitalist imperialist project for centuries and centuries, and created forms of life in resistance to it, forms of life separate from it, forms of resistance, forms of rebellion, forms of culture, forms of intellectualism, forms of spirituality, forms of romantic concepts, all in response to that domination. And there's a whole massive canon of Black authors that will teach you about this world that you're just coming into. And you still don't want to read them. You still don't want to take their words seriously. You still use them for decoration, and you don't take them to heart. And this is the reality that we live in, a world where globally anti-Blackness is still this dominant force, in part because nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to censor it. Nobody wants to give it air. Everybody wants to act like it's an unfortunate coincidence that this capitalist, billionaire rigged, extractivist, misogynist project that is the United States, as well as other global North countries coming into awareness of this. Everybody wants to act like that project, having Black people consistently at the economic bottom, at the cultural bottom, at the social bottom of its hierarchy, is a coincidence. Something that...
Oh my gosh. Look, are you taking a look at them? Are you looking at them? Are you looking at them? Are you reading them? Are you gleaning the knowledge from them? Are you looking at them? Well, here's a modern author, Margaret Kimberly, right? I've had her on this channel many times. Look, Bella, look, Black authors, right? The thing is, and these are people who are anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist. Some are socialist, some are communist. And the thing is like some people are just like, oh my God, I don't understand. Like, why is this happening? And baby, all you need to do is pick up just these two, and you already start to understand exactly what's going on. Like, it is crazy to me how many people will just be like, oh, I didn't know this. And it's like, what did we say? It's just like, damn.
That will just clear up if we just, tax the rich a little bit more. Oh, if we just tax the rich a little bit more, and if we just protest a little bit harder, and if we just, if we just get a bunch of white guys with guns, we'll sort this thing out. As if the white guys don't have guns so that they can maintain that system. As if as soon as the Black Panthers armed themselves, the NRA became interested in gun control. As soon as a Black person comes into the picture, all the non-Black people come together and figure out how they can keep the Black person at the bottom and use them so that they can maintain some level of resources, some level of economic advantage comparatively. And the light-skinned brown people and the East Asians, they're more than happy to stay underneath white people so long as they remain above Black people. Even certain indigenous folks who have long been in solidarity with Black people and who have had long, for a long time, movements in connection with Black people and a shared struggle with Black people. Even certain indigenous folks don't listen to Black people, don't like Black people. And frankly, this is a conversation that's not really for me to have. There's a lot of Black people that don't listen to Black people. In 2026, there is not a single person who I am interested in listening to if they haven't committed themselves to learning from Black history, from Black politics, from Black culture. I don't expect everybody to be a radical Afro-socialist, Afrocentrist overnight. I don't expect everybody to know everything because I don't know everything. I don't expect everybody to be perfect because I'm not perfect. But we've got to have a standard here. We've got to have a little bit of accountability. There's no excuse at this point. No excuse. Because Black people have had social media for a long time. Because we marched out in the streets for BLM. Because we watched what happened in real time in Minnesota. The last time in Minnesota. There's no excuse in 2026 for you still to be looking exclusively at white folks explaining to you how they oppress other people and not to the people that they oppress. There's no reason even that your education about what ICE does towards brown immigrants in the United States should lead you to only learn from white people who educate you about that. All these white folks who spring up with their platforms, and I got something to tell you about how to locally organize, and I got something to tell you about farms, and I got something to tell you about, it's great. A lot of the content is great. If you're not reading Black people, learning from Black people, in solidarity with Black people, it's just not going to be enough. You can call it a purity test if you want. You can call it woke and you can call it performative all you want. The same lessons will persist if you refuse to learn from the people who have studied them the most. I don't feel like that's a very complicated notion, but I really appreciate that a lot of people are trying. And maybe for some of you,
there's a point that I do want to point out as well so that people will get it. The person who is oppressed by another person will understand the oppressor more than the oppressor understands themselves. Case in point. If you want to know how white men really are, you ask a Black man. If you really want to know how white men really are, ask a Black man. If you want to know how men really are, you ask a woman. If you really want to know how straight people are, ask a queer person. Because we get the brunt of what some of y'all do. We get the brunt of it. We get the bad side. We get the short end of the stick. So therefore, we understand that aspect of you that you do not want to acknowledge. So this is why it's so important. If you want to know more about white supremacy, then learn from the people who are oppressed the most by it. If you want to know more about imperialism, then you talk to people from the global south. You talk to the people who live in countries that got massive amounts of resources. Right? Who are poor countries because the West made them poor, or not necessarily poor, but overly exploited.
This video will be if not a wake-up call, I don't want to be pretentious about myself, but some type of energizing moment in which you're like, yes, absolutely. This is the time that I start learning from Black liberation struggle. This is the time I read C.L.R. James, the Black Jacobins. This is the time that I start reading James Baldwin. This is the time I start reading any number of Black scholars, Black historians. This is the time that I start learning actually what the difference is between one African country and another. Frankly, this is a conversation that extends to Africa, especially when we talk about North Africa versus Sub-Saharan Africa. We are in the middle of an AFCON right now, an African international soccer competition, football competition, in which people learned about Patrice Lumumba for the first time because the Congo, the DRC, was participating, and they had a fan who dressed up as Patrice Lumumba as part of their fan cheer section. And it was explained to people what the significance of this was, only for an Algerian player to make fun of this Patrice Lumumba, to make fun of this fan. Yeah, even in Africa, this is a problem. Just think about how much you're missing. I highly encourage people to remain active, to build their wisdom, and to build their capacity for hope, because these are necessary resources. And part of how you learn, I see sometimes people post online, how can one find joy in a time like this? How can one find connection in a time like this? How do you not just give up? If Black people didn't give up in the 1700s, how the hell are you, a non-Black person, going to give up now?
That part.
What excuse do you have? Learn from what they've done. And I promise you, you will not regret it, because it has not only implications on what we can do politically as a collective, it has significant implications on how we live our own lives, on who we are, our own identities, our own abilities to connect with other people. I hope all this made sense. And
it made a hell of a lot of sense. Look, I'm telling you right now, I'm subscribed to his channel. I think it would be wise for many other people to subscribe to his channel. I put the link to his video in the description, and that's his secondary channel. That's just the channel where he goes off the cuff. It's not his primary channel. And on his secondary channel, he has over 50,000 subs. On his primary channel, I think he's like close to 300,000 subs, something like that. But just the analysis, off the cuff analysis right there, it is amazing. But the thing is, yes, we have been telling y'all. And the thing is don't lull yourself into a point of sadness that you're just now finding out. It's like when you know better, you do better. So now's the time to do better. Don't let yourself be paralyzed into feeling bad or terrible. Now's the time to take action. You know better. Now's the time to get up and start doing better. And the thing is like for instance, whenever I'm reading on my channel from these books, right? If you don't have the book, or if you don't feel like or have the bandwidth to read, if you guys just want to listen, I read and discuss books on my channel, which I'll be getting back to very quickly. But I do it, or you can pick up an audio version of these books. But at the same time, it's learning from the Black radical tradition so that you are well informed into why and how these systems operate. And then you can move accordingly. But the thing is like, I want to stress to people is that if you want to know how to operate the system, or not operate the system, if you want to know how to dismantle the system, you got to really talk to the people who are oppressed the most. Because okay. The best example I can give is in The Color Purple, where Celie is shaving Mister on the front porch with a straight edge. She is the most oppressed, and yet she has that much access. The point is, it is time for us to really start having solidarity. And that solidarity also means listening to some of the most oppressed. This is why I'm literally trying to also not just partner with Black Americans in my area, but I'm also trying to get with Native Americans within my area as well, so I can learn more from them, because they are also deeply oppressed too. And then also people who are immigrants too. They know what it's like from that aspect. Look at people from different aspects and widen your net, your scope of people from different backgrounds. If you don't know somebody that's trans, find people who are trans so you can learn more from them, right? If you don't know somebody that is neurodivergent, try to find people who are neurodivergent so you can actually have these conversations with them. If you're somebody who only has one Black friend, try to get two or three. Like that's just the thing, right? If you're a dude and you're constantly surrounded by other dudes, maybe try to find and make a platonic female friend so that you can know more about the mind of how women think, so that you're not stuck in this mind of, oh, this is how women think, and you're listening to dudes tell you. You know what I mean? Proximity, the closer to proximity, the more understanding you can have of another person. So try to put yourself in more proximity to people who you don't understand, who are marginalized in some way, shape, or form. Because once you start to do that, then that understanding awakens you. The synapses start connecting, and therefore you become somebody who's more well-rounded, and then you'll fight for liberation for all people, but you'll fight it from your area of the room, so to speak. You know what I mean? So, man, thank you so very much to Elliot Sang for that one. It was deep, but I'm glad that somebody that's non-Black said those things, because we've been saying it for forever, and it feels like it falls on deaf ears. And so we need more people to say, hey, are you listening to Black folks? And it's like, yeah, and this isn't mean it's just race alone or class alone. It is the intersection of both, because we live in a country that is not homogenous at all. And so we have to blend those two together in order to learn about our plight and then work towards real liberation that way. So let's start learning from each other, y'all. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you'd like to see any more, you can look here. 1.